High Talk Podcast Productions.
Pursue internal evolution.
Warning, these videos are uncensored and unrehearsed.
Trauma, right? And also its correlation to incarceration. But I want to start with from pre-entry to reentry and beyond. Now, I want to preface this conversation with the fact that when I do content, when I do videos, there's no team of content creators. There's nobody sending me scripts or any topics to particularly follow. I've kind of just been paying attention, right? I'm aware, and I'm a firm believer in one of the things is just the messages, especially in the form of numbers, right? 4 is a big number for me. I was born in April, 4th month. My life path is 4. There's 4 seasons. One of my favorite philosophies and lifelong practices is the 4 agreements. It kind of motivated my first book, which was Coach B's 4 Cycles of Freedom, a little 80-page memoir about my setting myself free while incarcerated. And so today, in this video, what I'm going to be covering is the 4 different times in the past 4 years that this particular topic have come across my feed, if you will, for lack of a better term. So what I'm talking about is ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences. And the first time that ACEs was presented to me, I was incarcerated in the feds in SeaTac, and they were doing what you call a pre-sentence investigation, PSI, for my sentencing. And I was asked 10 questions, and my lawyer had told me that due to my answers of the 10 questions, it would count as a mitigating factor, which means a factor that would give the judge a logical reason to maybe come downward on my sentence. So that was the first time I was introduced to ACEs. The second time was actually Fritzi Horstman, and she is the founder of Compassion Prison Project. I came into contact with her while I was incarcerated, and come to find out she does something called the Compassion Prison Circles, and a couple million views on her videos, and it really asks the same 10 questions, but in the way of a giant circle on the yard, on a prison yard. And as she asks the questions, if the answer is yes, then people step in until they get closer and closer and closer to each other. And so that's this video. The third time that I came into contact with ACEs, and that would be approximately a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe. In a peer training, I'm a state certified peer trainer, and they played this video by Nadine Burke. It's a TED Talk. That's this video. I've also used a tiny snippet of this video in a song I've recently released called Broken Growth, which is a no profanity song about trauma, essentially, and kind of covers the ACEs a little bit in the lyrics, and but it's my personal experience with these things. And finally, the fourth time you've seen in a previous video, was Wife After Prison. Shalia Bruno wrote a couple of books. That's the first one. Then the second book she wrote is The Second Sentence. So Shalia Bruno, she wrote this book, and that's kind of what really started to resonate with me in my own experience with ACEs and understanding pre-entry. And so for me, reentry starts with pre-entry. It's kind of like the Carfax of a used car, right? If your car's acting up and you just purchased a used car, for example, I'm just using this as an analogy, right? If you have purchased a car and this car is acting up and it's doing things that are abnormal, it would have been helpful had you had the full diagnostic report on this car. So then, when you do fix it or decide to diagnostics, right, and get it back to its like new condition, um, the past information is helpful. So that is one analogy, kind of how I view ACEs in direct relation to going to not only prison but maybe into addiction, and then post release, we call it reentry. Right? I like to say it's entry because the person going in usually typically isn't the person that comes out, especially if they do any significant amount of time whatsoever. So I think it's really important to understand ACEs, the history behind it, and understand the significance. So when someone says to you, um, and again, I'm talking to everyone, whoever wants to tap in and understand and just learn a little bit about the prevalence of trauma and the correlation to going to prison, to addiction, to mental health in general, right? And then specifically to those that are providing services in reentry. Hopefully, this information, this video is valuable to you. The information is not new, but I've never done an exclusive video on these particular things, and so here we go. Now, ACEs originally, and I have some notes here, right? So, what is ACEs? Adverse childhood experiences. So I'm going to actually ask the 10 questions that are on the ACEs quiz or test, survey, whatever you want to name it. These are the questions. Number one is, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? And it's simple yes or no. If you answer yes, that's 1 point. Number two, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Again, if you answer yes, that's a point. Number three, did an adult person at least 5 years older ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a inappropriate way? It says sexually. Number four, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Number five, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect you? Six, were your parents ever separated or divorced? Seven, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Number eight, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or used street drugs? Number 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? And finally, number 10, did a household member go to prison? High ACE scores correlate strongly with justice involvement, behavioral dysregulation, and difficulty managing stress. Trauma literally reshapes the brain, increasing risk of impulsivity, aggression, and emotional numbing. So that's pre-entry, right? So now when you hear, oh, I had a high ACEs score, these are the questions that that person answered yes to. So when we talk about trauma, right, and we talk about these terms that we throw around, trauma informed or trauma sensitive, I personally, in my opinion, believe that trauma informed is the knowledge. Like I just read those questions, right? So now you have the knowledge, you're informed of what somebody's trauma in their childhood. So, mind you, your score, if you have one, cannot change because this is based on when you were under 18, right? This is childhood trauma, childhood. So, it's not like you can have a 7 at 25 and then at 30 all of a sudden have a 10. Whatever your score is, that's what your score is because that's what happened, right? And trauma informed, that's the knowledge. Trauma sensitive is the action behind the knowledge. So when you have this knowledge, how are you being sensitive to that fact when you are supporting another individual in service of? And I'm speaking, specifically in the behavioral health field for that particular comment. Now, when I think about my personal experience, and again, as a peer trainer, we are taught very specifically how to share our story in order to connect. The goal is to, inspire hope. The goal is to have hope at the end, permission at the front, hope at the end. The balance, right? The pH, if you will. Big P, big H, everything else is lowercase in between. So for me to say that my score was 7 is typically not something that would be shared in those spaces. Now, as someone who has a ACEs score of, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, that is the Carfax. That is the report, the accident that happened in the past, right? It already happened. Now, that's pre-entry again. When you have this much complex trauma that lasts over a long period of time, unpacked, undealt with, unnamed, right? Because I often believe if you can name it, you can tame it, you can change it. And again, I just found out about these things 4 years ago. Within the last 4 years, ACEs has been presented to me in different ways. Um, and so I'm 41. So for 37 years, I had no idea that I was operating without having ever addressed or unpacked significant amount of trauma before I turned 18. Granted, I have been incarcerated on and off since I was 12. Gang impacted. My brother was gang impacted. I've seen, other family members incarcerated or heard about them being incarcerated. And there's also a lot of good family members, and I had a lot of support. Right, my mom's sisters, when we moved out here, owned businesses. One of my aunties was a judge, and so it's not all bad. But the thing that I think is very important when people are wanting to and diving into providing a service to recently released individuals from prison or jails or even psychiatric hospitals, right, is understanding what it is that you're trying to support them with. If you can't name it, how do you expect them to name it when they're coming to you for support? If you don't understand it, if you aren't trauma informed or trauma sensitive in your approach, there's no possible way that you could be of service. In fact, without the knowledge, you will be actually a disservice. So let me take it a little bit more, right? So we have pre-entry, all the things that happened um, in the childhood that could have added to leading into incarceration, addiction, mental health. Um, Now, the video I pointed to earlier, I highly suggest watching the 16-minute TED Talk. Nadine Burke really breaks down the ACEs, that it actually decreases life expectancy of human beings that have high ACEs that have not been navigated. Um, Big study that she did on it, or picked up rather, in her TED Talk, she talks about how um, uh, Kaiser Permanente, started this study, and this report was out, and then everything she did in her particular practice. So again, I highly suggest watching that video to give you a deeper understanding of the things that I'm talking about. Now, when we get into the prison aspect, so you take somebody who has a ACE score prior to turning 18, which you can't go to prison per se, you can go to juvenile prison, but prison for men is highly dangerous and volatile, right? And so you're going into this space, and what happens is you have this ACE score, and then you go into a prison system that is filled with things that will traumatize you. And just because you're there for however many years and you're doing your time, and everything is everything, like, you don't have a choice. Like, once you do the crime, they give you the sentence unless you escape, right? You don't have a choice. You're there. So while you're there, your brain, your body, your psychology, everything adapts to being there, but it doesn't make it normal. So the social norms inside prison are actually highly traumatic to someone who's never been, in that lifestyle. And then we're spending this time inside of prison, operating in our survival mode the entire time. There isn't a single day that somebody does in prison where they don't feel unsafe. I don't care who you are. Granted, there's various different levels in the hierarchy of how prison is ran, with the politics, prison politics, gangs, like, leaders have a different kind of time than somebody who, came in with a funny beef, right? And I'm not going to say what that is um, on YouTube, but understand that there's very different POVs. For example, and I'll just tell you a little story of somebody I did some time with, right? So I knew a guy, he was a white guy, um, on the streets. When he was young, both his parents were together. Everything was wonderful. Um, this is according to him. Walk in the yard, you talk to people, you get close to people, you kind of hear what got them there. And me, I was born curious, right? So if I'm walking the yard with someone and we're chopping it up, I I get curious. I ask certain things, like, when I see certain characteristics in people that make me think, why are you even in prison? Right? It makes me even more curious. Like, how did that happen? So in this particular case, we're talking about a youth, middle class, whatever, maybe mid to upper, parents together. Everything's good. And I'll try to be brief, but there's some details in this that really matter. So mind you, I believe he was around 12, 13 when his parents split up. So up to that point, 10, 12 years old, maybe 0 aces, maybe 1, right? Um, After, so somewhere between 12 and then I believe he said he was around 15 when his mom, he stayed with his mom during the breakup. Didn't really hear much from dad after the fact. And, going to school still. Remember him saying he got good grades, typical, normal. And then mom brings in new man. New man is hostile. New man beats mom. New man beats him. Um, and prior to any of that, he wasn't using any drugs. He wasn't interested in anything nefarious. The street life didn't appeal to him. Somehow, due to the fact that he was getting beat by a grown man, in his early teens, led him to kind of seek safety and guidance elsewhere. Where did he find this safety and this guidance? With some of the local hood members, some of the other gang members who had already experienced high aces. And again, fast forward, he's hanging out with them. They offer to help him out. They go over one day. They're getting into it with the stepdad slash boyfriend, whatever you want to call it, and they beat this man nearly to death. Maybe, yeah, nearly to death. So he gets like attempted murder, all the things. Now, again, this kid was not a gang member. This kid was not privy to the rules of the streets or any of these things, right? Um, According to him, he loved all people. He wasn't racist. He had, Mexican girlfriends, black girlfriends throughout his middle school, high school career up to that point. And so when, they got arrested, he told the truth, that he was wanting this man to stop putting hands on his mom. His friends were there. They heard the argument, whatever happened, right? So now this same guy, what we would call when we were, in the game, this is the square homie, right? Unbeknownst to him, he now has a jacket on him. They're calling him a rat, a snitch, all the things. So he goes into county jail. While he's in county jail, some of the guys from the gang send word over because they separate him. They were co-defendants, and those guys are like, "Hey, he told," and all this and that. So he gets pretty messed up. He gets beat up. He ends up in solitary, so he's fighting his case in the county. Spends a lot of time um, isolated in fear, probably confused, and I'm talking to the very much older version of this kid. And so while all this happens, he eventually gets to a prison. This thing follows him. And while he's in prison, um, and I jumped over a bunch, he's not in prison at this time for that particular incident, but this incident followed him throughout because now that he had, been incarcerated, he got out, he stayed doing the things, he started doing drugs, all these other things. And while he's in prison, he comes to a point where he decides, you know what? I'm done going to the hole over this thing. I was a kid, whatever. He starts saying, I'm not going to do the PC thing, the protective custody anymore. And I'm going to do my time the way I want to, whatever. It doesn't work like that in prison politics, right? So he's consistently fighting for his life in prison, physical combat. Sometimes weapons were involved, all the things. He later then gets approached by the Aryans, the white gang recruits this person. And as a new recruit, he is then told, hey, we got your back. We understand, blah, blah, blah. However, you have to do A, B, C, or D in order to ride with us. So now you have this white guy who was not races, who was not opposed to dating outside of his race or any of these things. And now all these things are being indoctrinated in him. And by believing in this indoctrination, he is provided protection. And so throughout his bid, he ends up getting more time for some stabbings and some things that he participated in by order of the group that was protecting him. This same person, one part I kind of glazed over is he had a child. Um, well, he got someone pregnant in between his incarcerations, younger years, early 20s, I believe, and the girl that he got pregnant was a Mexican girl. And so here we are. By the time he runs into me, we're in the feds. Just this last time I was on bail, and let's see, he's close to 50 at this point. And so his entire life started with 0 aces, ended up with however many he accumulated just from the mom bringing in a hostile and violent man. So prior to turning 18, he racked up some aces, and all of that just kind of snowballed into one poor decision after another, after another, after another, and now he's late 40s, maybe early 50s. I can't recall his exact age, but the thing about this story, and this is a true story. This just happened, not just, but I've been home about 3 years in December. I've been released. So 4.5 4.5 years ago or so, I was on the yard with this person, and he, at this time he has a swastika on his neck, essentially considered a dropout by this time. And so, he no longer associates with the racial aspects. He doesn't fill his heart with hate and all this. I mean, clearly he's walking the yard talking to me. We used to do legal work and stuff like that together, right? So what I ended up finding out is, or what he ended up finding out and shared with all of us, was that his son, his adult son at this point, was on his way to prison, the same prison we were at. So, I was in Terminal Island in California. His son had got incarcerated up in SeaTac and had put in to go there. I don't remember the details of like the relationship with with the kid's mom, but he had some form of knowledge that his son was A, his son, and B, on his way to prison, and C, coming to the prison he was at. He was quite excited about this. And, you know, things get around, stuff happens. His son shows up to the prison we're at. And I think he put together a care package, all the things. He's like, I've never met my son in person. I do remember him saying that. But this story does not end well. Son gets there, seeks out his father, uh, receives the package. Like he accepts it. Someone from one unit got it over to him, took it, and he's like, got the thing. But the first time they met face to face, the son took off on him, damn near killed him, right in the unit. And that, for me, was traumatic. I'm a father of 7. I couldn't imagine if my 22-year-old son came into the prison I was at and put hands on me. This man was not expecting that, and to this day, I still don't know why. Right? Who knows what his mom was telling him? Who knows what he thought about this guy? Being half Mexican, maybe he just was like, heard that he was an Aryan, whatever. I still don't know. But the point is that is not an abnormal occurrence. Maybe the taking off on them part, like I've rarely seen sons fight dads or vice versa in the prison system, but I have seen many times where sons were in prisons with their dads. Many times. This isn't a one off or two off or three off thing. This is a problem. You know, when these things happen, when we normalize visiting in prisons and things like that, we are not breaking cycles. We are encouraging, in a way. We are leaning towards, some people would say, like enabling the behavior. Like, granted, you know, someone gets incarcerated, they do their time, they should be getting visits, you know, with the parent that's incarcerated if they have kids that are in their life. I'm a big proponent of that. But the part that I'm not, that I can't get behind is embracing your child in the prison you're in and thinking of it in any way, shape, or form as a positive, because it's not. It is absolutely not. So I digress. Now, the reason why I wanted to really tell that particular story is because of the impact it had on me personally. It's part of the reason, one of the reasons, but it's a significant moment in time that I served that impacted me in a way that made me think, I can never, I will not, I have to do something different when I get out. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it because I didn't yet have the tools. I was studying psychology. I was reading things. I was, you know, doing the programming, all the things I had to do to get out. But I didn't identify, at least within the programs that were present during my time, I didn't identify a set of tools that would keep me out. Part of that is going to be acknowledging the things that happened in my past, and whether, you know, I have spoken to a therapist. I did peer support. I did recovery coaching. I accumulated a lot of mentors when I first came home, and I listened, and I got to understanding that, yeah, they had the halfway house because of COVID. When I got to the halfway house, the federal halfway house, it was free, so I didn't have that particular like rent bill hanging over my head. My brother had copped me a phone. There was some money given to me. I was able to borrow my brother's car. But the thing that mattered the most was my temperament. The thing that would have determined my successful reentry. And mind you, from 12 years old to 40, I have been incarcerated more than 8 or 9 times. So I had already failed at reentry multiple times. And it was all due to the fact that I did not have tools for emotional regulation. I did not know how to navigate the things I was angry about. I did not know how to let go of blaming the system. It's not even a person. Like, how can you even fathom reconciling with an idea, essentially, an entity? It's not even a person. I can't talk to someone and write a letter to the system and say, I forgive you, system. No, I had to do the work internally. And I had to find tools that would help me come home and be a father and not feel isolated and scared and anxious and stigmatized and unworthy in certain situations, embarrassed when I got my first job, you know, not knowing how to do things like type, not knowing what acronyms meant like PPT, PowerPoint. Um, you know, these things were also little traumatic experiences. I interviewed multiple times before I got let into the field. And a lot of the no's were because of how recently I was released, not necessarily because they didn't believe I was qualified or passionate or capable and able to do the work. It was because they were holding it against me that I had just finished paying the debt. So the debt actually wasn't paid, even though I was out from doing the sentence for the crime. And so I think one of the most important things that we need to focus on, those of us that are hope dealers, those of us that call ourselves doing supportive reentry and workshops, when I see like the financial literacy, the early stages of learning how to navigate social media, emails, like for people that did a lot of time, these things matter, right? They do. In addition to emotional regulation, unpacking trauma, unstigmatizing therapy. Because as long as we think that therapy is bad or therapy is wrong, or that the masculine man doesn't do therapy or doesn't do emotions, or you know, we're not going to have successful reentry with just classes that are surface level. We have to stop doing things that are external solutions for internal conditions. The condition of somebody who has done time in prison, and it doesn't matter how much time. I mean, to an extent, it matters. It matters more if they've done a lot of time, right? And again, that's subjective. A year to somebody who's going into prison for the first time is a long time. It doesn't get diminished because you're supporting someone who did 20 or 30 years. Granted, they have a lot more complex trauma that's been happening for a lot longer. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that the person who just did a year experienced 365 days worth of traumatic things, of being on high alert, hyper vigilant. Just imagine day one in jail and or prison, you are getting literally stripped naked and then stripped down to a number. So you are getting metaphorically, spiritually, emotionally, and then physically stripped, butthole naked, probed, examined, right? And then you're ordered to do things. And that's by the guards. That's by the people that are you are the ward of, right? You're their ward now. That's why it's called a warden. You go there and they strip you naked and they talk wild and crazy to you, disrespectful, all the things. And then you get into the living unit, and there's an entire different type of orientation that takes place, one that your life depends on having. So if you aren't oriented when you go into a jail or prison, you could very easily make a mistake that could cost you your life. Now, that's day one. Now imagine doing 365 days times a bunch more. 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15, 20, 30. You get it. What needs to happen is understanding all of that trauma from prison itself is coming home when that person gets out. And that trauma is added on top of the ACEs that led to going to prison in the first place. And that was never dealt with. Now you have this compounded trauma of the time they did in there. And then they're coming home to be culture shocked, depending on how much time they did. Society, cities grow and change and look different. Families are completely different. Spouses leave. So now, things are different, completely and utterly different. And not only are you getting out to a different world, you're coming home a different person with a completely scientifically rewired brain. Your brain will not look the same on a scan prior to prison as it will exiting prison. This is science, right? I'm not making excuses for anybody who gets out and goes back. What I'm saying is there is a reason for certain behaviors that are unbeknownst to the person doing the behaviors. If you can name it, you can change it, you can tame it. And if you can't name it, how can you address it? How can you address a problem you don't know is a problem? So when people are coming home, now we're going to move into post-incarceration syndrome. So this is a particular relatable form of PTSD, if you will. And we're talking about institutionalization, complex trauma. The core symptoms are hyper-vigilance, emotional numbing, anxiety, dependency on structure. Someone needs structure because they have been told what to do, when to do, how to do, and sometimes with consequences if they didn't do it. So either you live in the hole, which is 23 and 1, 23 hours locked in a box, 1 hour, which is usually just a few feet away from the box you're locked in, into like a small shower enclosure or a hallway with fences. So from one box to another box, the hour is just outside of the first box. And that's where you can maybe make a phone call and then you're going back to the box, right? So if you don't follow the rules, if you don't do what they say do, then that's your other option of doing time by yourself, isolated in a box, eating all your meals by yourself, talking with people through doors and walls and ventilation systems. And sometimes people choose to do that, which is even more trauma. And there's even more science behind what solitary confinement does to somebody mentally. Rewires the brain, disrupts emotions, disrupts your spiritual core. Is not going to function properly when you are sitting in a box, isolated, angry, sad, anxious, and not knowing any way, shape, or form how to handle any of those emotions because you aren't giving coping skills or tools, right? So then you have fear of failure, right? Fear of connection. Now, when we talk about like emotional numbing, and I can just speak for me personally, right? Birthdays, right? I personally spent over 15 years. The longest stretch was 9.5, right? So I've spent over half my adult life incarcerated. What's a holiday matter, right? So there's times where I'm surrounded by my family and they want to celebrate me on a birthday or something. And everything in me just wants to not do that. Not. And I don't even understand it until I started doing this type of research, right? Everything in me, I feel awkward. I feel anxious. I'm like, why is, I don't, it was a problem. And it was something that I had to solve in order to do the work that I'm doing now, right? There were times when I first got out and my kids would tell me, I love you, Dad. And I would just look at them because I couldn't even formulate the words, or when they came out, it sounded like someone else was saying it because I knew I had to, but I didn't actually have a connection to the words coming out of my mouth. And I also knew that that wasn't my fault. I also knew that something was in was broken. Something inside of me was not working the way that it worked prior to going to prison. I knew that. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to go about changing it or feeling different, right? There were times where um, I could go long time without any in-depth interaction. I often tell people, because I'm a trainer, people see me on social media, you see me making these types of videos, and you would think that I'm an extrovert. I think I'm a professional extrovert, but prison made me an introvert. I am much more comfortable by myself. And I have an entire support system, a family, 7 children, there's 4 grandbabies, my wife. Um, I have siblings out here that I can just pull up on. I have some good friends, that support me and things like that. But I had to be, for a while, I had to think about my feelings, which to me kind of defeats the purpose of feelings and emotions, right? Because we just have those. I didn't just have them in my recent release, my experience with the love feeling. I was looking for it. I would say the words, I would, do the things, but inside I was disconnected because I had been incarcerated and galvanized against the disappointments, right? People would say, "Hey, I'm coming to see you. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'll be there." Or call me on this day, and then they wouldn't answer the phone. I wouldn't hear from them for months. So eventually, instead of being consistently let down, I removed things that could be taken from me. And one of those was being attached to a feeling, being attached to someone picking the phone up on the other end. By removing that attachment is essentially how I was able to not have those disappointments, those letdowns. So I started to just not have expectations and not be attached to the outcome of other people's willingness to engage with me while I was incarcerated. And then so when I got out, it's almost like I connected internally so deeply, I unplugged my connection externally to everyone around me. And I had to figure out a new balance, a new way to still be fully healed and understand myself, but also how can I reconnect and still enjoy the company of my family, my wife, my kids, my friends, right? Instead of feeling like I'm a part of a play, playing a character in everybody else's kind of life, and they're all enjoying things and having fun, and I'm doing the things externally. It looks like I'm present and there and feeling emotions and love and all these things. But when I first got out, I can look back now and say I was not that in tune with those type of strong connectedness, those emotions that I know I used to feel. I know that I beat down all the sensitivity in me when I was incarcerated. And I shoved it so far down that it was hard for me to dig it back up when I got out. And I'm glad that I was able to. I'm glad that I'm I'm consistently in spaces with people that I can talk to about this type of thing. And now I'm, just as passionate about supporting others in finding themselves and reconnecting with loved ones, the thing in us that allows us to bond. I think prison takes that, breaks it, distorts it, weaponizes it, changes it. So, how could somebody possibly be expected to return to society and do the things that other people have always done, have maybe never have to experience being separated from? Like, I feel like people don't talk about it enough, to be separated from your ability to feel. I can't even really put words on that. It's not something that I feel have that I've seen even in social media or in spaces where I'm talking to people. It's ignored a lot. It's the reason why, um, you know there's so much recidivism, I believe, because there's no connection. So if there's no connection, there's no buy-in. There's no value on freedom when it's easier and more comfortable to go back to prison, where you have a status, or you have, what they call, your prison rich, right? Your commissary is always full, your locker's always full, you're important, you matter. Um, the relationships you have in there feel like a bond. They feel authentic. And then you come home, and one of the first things that you have to do is decide whether you're going to try to maintain some of those bonds from in there. But it's like, you want to get out and not worry about what was going on in there. And also, you want to be true to your word. I know a lot of people who tell a lot of people on their way out the door all the things they're going to do for them, or write them, or make sure they can call them, and then that number doesn't work, or they end up seeing them when they come back, right? And I just think that the focus of reentry should be spiritual and emotional healing, and teaching of psychological tools and coping mechanisms, even before you give them the money to get a car, or to get housing. Because what's housing matter if they can't emotionally regulate themselves, and then they get into a relationship and the police get called because they get in an argument? And then when the police come, they usually send the mail away. And so the cycle continues. And I've seen it so many times. When I was incarcerated in SeaTac, the majority of the returns were usually in some shape or form disputes with the spouse, or the girlfriend, or the baby's mom, or a small percent I seen, were getting into it because they took a construction job. People know constructions have sailor mouths, right? You talk a certain type of way to somebody who hasn't dealt with the fact that prison social norms are not regular social norms. So, when somebody says something out of their mouth, and it's disrespectful in society, you don't just beat them up, right? That's not how society works. But we don't know that all the time. I mean, we know it, but are we able to navigate it in the moment? No, not without tools, not without coping mechanisms, not without being able to name what's happening. We need that type of training, those types of organizations that are more focused on the unpacking. We need more therapists that are reentry focused, that are able to really dive into the trauma that led to prison. And then step two, okay, now that we've unpacked kind of what led to you going to prison, right? Let's focus on your ACEs, unpack that a little bit, find some coping mechanisms that help you. You have to forgive. No one's saying forget, but whatever is going on, whatever led, whoever you're angry at the most, you gotta let it go. And you have to decide what tools work for you, because that is imperative. Because the next step is navigating all the things that happened while you were incarcerated, because there are, things that happen in there that are going to exacerbate the trauma that led there. And then you have to unpack all that, decide to forgive and let go of those things. The guards that were just POSs for no reason, that weren't trauma informed, or maybe they were informed, they had the knowledge, but they weren't trauma sensitive. So they treated you poorly, talked bad to you. They do a lot of, and this isn't all guards, just like people say, all cops are bad cops or whatever. It's not true. People are people, right? They're individually motivated by different things. I knew a lot of supportive and helpful guards that just, hey, I'm just here to get my check. You're already doing your time. I'm not here to punish you. That was their attitude, and that was their approach. They treated you like a human. They talked to you like a human, and they were compassionate. And who knows what their why was for doing the work, but it sure wasn't to torture or make it worse for the people that were serving their time. And then you have a small percentage of officers who believe that their role is to be punitive, is to treat you like a POS and to provoke you. My kids use the term rage bait. So a lot of officers will rage bait, incarcerated individuals to losing their cool, and then they can put them in the hole for 23-1, right? And then you're carrying all of that anger compounded with whatever's going on the streets with your family, your kids, your siblings, your stuff, right? A lot of people lose everything when they go to prison. All their money that was getting them all the clout and fame and all the things that they stacked up and put away, it's gone, right? And even if it isn't, it's not what it was when you get out. And so you have to be willing to let all of that stuff go. Debts from the game. You can't be getting out hunting down people that owed you for that bag from 6 years ago. Not if you're serious about your freedom. Not if you're serious about breaking cycles. If you're not, you're not. This video, this message, the services that are available, I'm not talking to you then. That's fine. You have the authority over your own self. And when you recognize that, you also get to choose whether you want to do things the right way, whether you want to have a better quality of life where you're not going in and out of the revolving doors of the incarceral system. That's your choice. This video is not for you if you're not that person. If you're still thinking that, you're a soldier in the game and you have to abide by the rules, and anybody that doesn't is a sucker and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, see how that works out for you, right? But when you are ready, I do reentry. I am a reentry coach. I'm an anger management specialist. I'm a parenting training specialist as well. And I'm very passionate, and I have the lived experience. I am credible because I lived it. I know what it's like to be in there, to be gang impacted, to adhere to politics that didn't resonate with my soul, to do things that I didn't want to do, but the alternative I also didn't want to have happen to me more, right? That's called surviving. I survived lots of times incarcerated. I survived all of the prisons, and I will not take full credit, right? I say often to people, my angels are undefeated. That's why I'm here today. My divine assignment is this: it is not glorified. It doesn't sell. I am in no way, shape, or form rich. In fact, I'm jobless. I'm a contractor at the mercy of organizations deciding if they want to use me to train a particular thing or not. If they don't, I don't have any money, right? And so I'm very humble and I'm very grateful and I'm very understanding of what it takes to really care, what it takes to be of service. What it takes is somebody like me saying to somebody who is in the first stages of their recovery, of their reentry, and saying, hey, what happened? Right? What do you need to be supported in the outcome that you want? If the outcome you want is to get back in the game and do all the things and have one foot in and one foot out, or both feet fully implanted, and that's just where you're at, cool. I'm not the one to hit up, right? But if you are genuinely concerned after you get out, or you are supporting someone in your family that is recently released, this is the research that will support you. Understanding trauma is the first step, in my opinion. And supporting someone else in understanding the traumas that are motivating the behaviors that sometimes they can't even explain, which lead right back into the incarceral system. Trauma is not a trend. Trauma is not a joke. Mental health is not something to be scoffed at, right? And there is the small percentage of people who can do a whole bunch of time, get out, and then next thing you know, they're like big CEOs. They wrote the book, they're doing the thing, and they don't go back. It happens. But that's the tip of the iceberg. You know, in the training, we do an iceberg activity where we draw an iceberg and we draw a line, and the top peak is only 10% of what's presented. When you're looking at somebody's success story, you're looking at somebody on social media, when you're seeing somebody and it appears that they're successful and that they got it like that, it's more often than not the case. That 90% that you don't see, that's underneath the surface, that's where all the work got done. That's where all the trauma lives. That's where all the anxiety is, or the fear of a bill not getting paid is, or the repossession of the car they thought they needed to have when they first got out and then had to give back to the bank after a year or so because they didn't have realistic expectations and they didn't understand what it would actually take to live a lifestyle worth keeping, right? When you're risking your freedom to get that 10,000, 20,000 bag move and it's illegal, that's cool, but it goes away fast and you can't get it back. And there's no tax returns for it. There's no medical, there's no benefit whatsoever except the imagined benefit of immediate gratification. All right, you got the money right now. But what happens when you get locked up? It all goes to a lawyer and or bail or your friends or your girlfriend or your wife or your kids or everywhere but where you want it to go. And then you go to prison. And then you sit there angry and get in the books and you talk all the good game. But if you're not addressing the core issues, if you're not addressing the why works both ways. For somebody to be successful in life, it is often said that you have to know your purpose, you have to know your why, and you have to move towards it. So think about why you went to prison. Think about why you're doing the things you're doing. Think about why you even believe it's okay to, for example, put your hands on a woman or to put your hands on a coworker or a boss for words. that come out of their mouth. Why do you think that's okay? Why do you believe that you're entitled to things that you aren't? Why do you believe that you should have longevity and success while causing harm to community? Make those things make sense. And since you can't, and I'll debate anyone, anytime from the game who thinks that what I'm doing is not as good or positive or successful as what you're doing, run it. Let's talk about it. Um, that's all. That's all I got for right now. And I just think that at the end of the day, you know, if you're a parent, that has returned back into your kid's life, think about the fact that you going to prison gives them at least one ACE score, no matter what. Your child now has one ACE score just because you went to prison or jail. You do a drug, that's 2, right? If you do something violent to a girlfriend, boyfriend, partner in front of that child, that's 3, right? And it can go up fast. So are you contributing to your child's ACEs, or are you contributing to your child's positive growth and development? And do you care? You know, those are the questions. This video, this topic has been, 4 or 5 years in the making. I guess 41 if you want to get technical, butterfly effect, right? But I do believe that sometimes the things that we are put through are to find our purpose. And this is mine. That's not glamorous. It's not that I can get up and go buy the rims or the tent in fact, I'm not even interested in those things. When I have extra money, I pour into writing a book. I do my own podcasting, editing, and it takes a lot of time and effort, and sometimes, feeling disconnected from the family because they think I'm doing more here in the field, in the community, pursuing endeavors than I am pouring into family. And I have to figure out that balance as well. I'm more comfortable alone doing things that are hopefully supporting individuals and changing outcomes in their lives for the better, right? And so, yeah, we're a little bit over an hour. I didn't know how long this was going to take. If I do edit it, it'll really be to put some pictures in the edits of the things I talked about in the beginning. But other than that, I'm just going to leave this video as is. I never script or record twice. If for some reason this video doesn't work out, it is what it is. But that's what I got. My name's Coach B. I'm a holistic human development and evolution life coach with the expertise in family reunification, reentry, and recovery. Tap in, subscribe, share this video, share this knowledge with someone else. Do the research yourself. All right, take care.